And welcome to daily briefing number 26 from the Small Business Association of Michigan. This is Wednesday, April 15th, day 23 of the Stay Home, Stay Safe order, 15 days until April 30th, the current end of that Stay Home, Stay Safe executive order. We're continuing to try to keep our members updated, small businesses in general updated on what's happening throughout the state that affects you. This morning, in fact, our entire staff met via Zoom and just kind of reconfirmed that we're still at work. We're still on mission to help small businesses navigate this time, to help you work through this. So welcome. Once again, my co-host here is Brian Calley, who is dressed for success today and working from his car once again. Hey, Brian.
Yeah, back in my car today. I did pull out a paisley tie, and some may say that is not in style anymore. But starting today, right now, it's back in style.
All right, like it. Hey, Brian, we've had a lot of questions about kind of focusing on the state level resources and the state level public policy issues. And a lot of that's happening out of the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, and specifically the Unemployment Insurance Agency. And you have arranged a guest today to come and talk to us about it.
Yeah, I wanted to introduce Sean Egan, who works in the Labor and Economic Opportunity area, and a lot of the questions that we have submitted and shared back on this briefing, Sean has really been the person who has supplied that information. And so I asked him to come on and have a conversation with us, especially now that the portal is opened for those who are self-employed or 1099 contractors. And we understand that's not the majority of our members; that's a subset of our members. But there are a lot of relevant issues I thought maybe we could cover today. And so I thought I'd kick it over to Sean, maybe talk first about the opening of the unemployment portal, and maybe a few tips for people who are filing or had filed before and got denied and that sort of thing. To give us, Sean, maybe give us a bit of an overview. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. Just real brief. My role is as the Deputy Director for Labor, so we'll be talking about other stuff. I primarily oversee MIOSHA, wage and hour, comp, and the Bureau of Employment Relations, and I've been called a spokesmodel for UIA. You guys can make your own judgment on that. But I work closely with the Director, Steve Gray, and I do a lot of outreach to a lot of different groups to help facilitate discussions, because as you know, there's only a few of us. There's a whole lot of people doing the work, but there's only a few of us that are out talking about it as much as we can. So a couple of things, bullet points. Brian heard most of these yesterday, so he might get a little bored. But as of Monday, we crossed over 1 million new claims since March 15th in the unemployment system. And that includes opening up the portal for those that are 1099 gig workers, self-employed, to file for benefits. They will qualify for the PUA, which is that $600 that's been all over the news, that runs through the end of July pretty much. To do that, folks that are in those categories, they're going to go to the Michigan UIA website. You're going to click on set up my WAM account, and you're going to do that as an employee. Now, we understand that you're owners or whatever, but there's a tab for employees and a tab for employers. You're going to want to use the employee tab. Some of the information that you'll see when you get in there, you will have to provide, as far as I know, you still will have to provide some type of proof of income. Working as a self-employed or a 1099, that's for obvious reasons, because how could you prevent just anybody from logging in at that point, right? So you won't have to have like a Fed ID number if you're a sole proprietor and you don't have one of those or anything like that, but it's going to ask you for some of that information. That $600 is retroactive. Now for the self-employed, I think because the system was just open, it's probably going to be from Monday going forward, but the week beginning March 29th, which was a Sunday, I believe, forward will qualify for that $600 benefit. Uh, and those are starting to get paid now. Now you can, when you get in there and you set it up, recognizing that many of you have never had to do this, you'll be asked if you want to do direct deposit, and if you do not, you'll get a debit card similar to what you do for employees when they have the choice of direct deposit or not. That card will get loaded. You do have to certify every 2 weeks, just like everybody else. The work search requirements are not in play right now, so you won't have any of that kind of stuff happening. If you're self-employed, that's not likely anyway. But if you continue to be self-employed and you are able to earn income, you will need to report that just like any other worker would need to do. And that can offset against unemployment benefits. I'm not exactly sure how the PUA is going to apply that. And because that's just, it is what it is. You know, in Michigan, we have our own max of 362, and that has an offset provision. I don't believe the PUA has that. But as soon as you get back ramped up, you know, I know that some of your members are certainly in that essential category, so they're continuing to do what they always do. Obviously, they're not going to apply for those types of benefits. On the trust fund at the beginning of this, Rob had asked that question, Brian, before you were able to jump on, but the trust fund at the beginning of this was somewhere around $4.3 billion. That is a huge cushion. Where it stands today, I don't exactly know the exact number, but we still feel we're in very good shape to not be in a situation where we'd have to do that additional tax and all the stuff that we had to do during the 08-09 crisis. UIA is ramped up with hundreds of more employees. They're working with the Michigan Works agencies to train their staff. We're bringing in non-essential staff from around the state that are getting trained right now to help facilitate the volume. So when you do go on michiganuia.gov or michigan.gov/UIA, you'll see a day of the week to apply category by last name. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday are, I have it right here on my list somewhere. So if you give me just a moment. One point that we do like to note is that while we're seeing in the news that there's a lot of struggles, about 90% are getting through the system, and that's been working fine. Online is by far the method that we encourage everybody to use. The MyWAM system will have some prompts in there to help you. You can go over to a chat function if you need some additional support. The UIA has paid out about $350 million already to about 600,000 Michiganders. So I guess that gives us an idea right there on what the trust fund is. One thing to keep in mind with the trust fund too is that because we have so many critical and essential workers still out there doing their thing, those employers will continue to be putting funds into the trust fund too. So it's not as though nothing's coming in anymore. One other piece that I want to mention, because I'll forget, is that the executive order also eliminated the experience rating for benefits provided during this period. So if you're laying off people and they're claiming benefits right now because of COVID, they're not going to be charged with their experience rating on that moving forward. So there's a nice little window to avoid kind of kicking your percentage up during this period.
Sean,
So
let me press up a little bit. I think some of the confusion was, I think the very first executive order, bars and restaurants, that was connected to that executive order. And so that people understood if you're a bar or restaurant, you lay people off, there's no negative experience coming back. And I think it was less clear when we went to stay home, stay safe, that it applied to everybody. Is that the way it is? So
it's the way we understand it, yes. And the updated order, I think, is more clear. And I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but the governor reissued the unemployment executive order. And I think it is more clear in there that it's not specific to bars and restaurants.
Okay.
That's
a question we've been getting a lot. So that's
yeah.
helpful to hear it, that is broad-based. It's all companies who've had to lay off furlough people.
Yeah, and we got a question in today too, and it is relevant to everybody, but the original order expired on April 14th. So there was some concern that it was already over, but it's not. That order had been reissued and taken out to a future date. Just a real quick on the last names: A through L, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday; M through Z, Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday. You won't get kicked off the system if you don't really fall into that, but that's to try to spread out the volume that is coming through all the time. And certainly if you're doing it online, if you go on after 8 p.m., things drop off precipitously, and you can usually get through the system a little bit quicker. Most people, it take them about 15 minutes, as long as the system's running well. We did have a crash on Monday. It wasn't specific to UIA. Many of the servers for the state of Michigan went down, but they're back up and running. They do have dedicated tech people to help you get through all of those pieces too. So they're doing everything that they can and should be doing to really make the system work. Brian mentioned yesterday, I'm going to steal his thunder. You guys have a great, resourceful, very smart leader, and he shared that the system was developed for about 100,000 claims. I don't remember the period of time, but 100,000 claims, and we're well beyond those kind of numbers. And the system they're ramping it up the best that we can, and it's been working. It's been working.
Yeah, it was a system that was designed to handle about 100,000 claims a week, which was 25% higher than the heights of the Great Recession in Michigan.
Yeah.
So it was quite a cushion, and it held up. It held up really well, all the way up to about 130 claims. It was moving a little slow, but showing a little bit of strain. But the capacity had to be way built after that, when it got up to 300,000 and then 400,000 claims in one time period, and then eligibility changed.
Yeah.
Sean, could you touch on a little bit then? We've heard from a few independent contractors that is they go through and there's nowhere that it asks, like it just they're going as an employee, and then even since Monday, then they get a denial. Is that a normal experience? Walk us through it just a little bit, so somebody who's trying to figure this out, I got a denial back now, what do I do?
Yeah, so potentially there's going to be some flaws as we get rolling with the self-employed specifically, because they were never qualified. So that part is pretty much all new. If you have already applied, and I appreciate that question, if you have already applied and received a denial, you do not need to apply again. You do not want to start a second claim either. We've been asked that question. Should I file a new claim even though I started one? The answer is no. UIA is doing sweeps to try to capture people that have applied and been denied. This has come up with student workers. It's come up with the self-employed, come up with restaurant workers who work on tips that, sometimes are right on the bubble of having earned enough. So with PUA and as well as the expansion in Michigan, they are going back through the system to try to catch those. If you do have a specific question, the recommendation is through that MyWAM account, there's an email function to email those questions in, because that'll go right to the response team. Otherwise, you can work through me, of course, but I do the same thing. I just, if I don't know the answer, I'll email the question over to the response team. So that's the best info I have right now, Brian, is that if you've applied and been denied, don't freak out. Try not to stress. We know that we're all working people, whether you're a business owner, a 1099 or otherwise, that we need income. But they're doing the things that they need to do to try to sweep those people back in and make sure they're getting what they're supposed to get.
Hey, Sean, I have one final question. It's one that we've been getting, it's $932 if you qualify for the PUA and the federal money and the state money, and so there are employers who are concerned that when they may have applied for a PPP, a Paycheck Protection Program, which means they can bring their employees back.
Yeah.
That they will make that offer, and that employees may in fact feel like they're getting a better deal on UIA on unemployment. What are the rules here? Is an employee obligated to come back if they're offered the job back?
So one of the things that you should know, and one of the things we have to pay attention to, is that the executive order created criteria for people to qualify for unemployment benefits. And that includes that they're sick with COVID, or they've been exposed to COVID, they have an underlying health condition, they have to care for a child. It does not ultimately change all of management's rights. So if you are an essential business, and this is something we'll need to talk about further, because as Brian mentioned yesterday, you can qualify for the Paycheck Protection Program and not necessarily have to reopen. right? So that's a
Right.
different scenario. So if you're an essential business and that employee does not necessarily meet the criteria to qualify for unemployment, you can absolutely recall them to work. And we encourage people to go back to work. We recognize that challenge. I know that when the CARES Act was passed, there was an amendment to try to cap so you couldn't go above 100% of your pay. But with the dual benefit, theoretically, that's around $24 an hour, which we know is well above the average pay in Michigan. And we're going to run into these problems, but you know, certainly that doesn't include health insurance. It doesn't include all the other things that most employers provide. So it's better for folks to get back on the payroll under the PPP, where frankly, all of your members are sort of taking the risk, right? That's all going to work out and keep them employed. But if you're an essential business or critical infrastructure, you're continuing to operate and those people don't meet those criteria, you can absolutely recall them to work. And if they refuse, they could have unemployment problems, right? Because they're going to have to report a refusal to work. They don't have to go search for work. So if you're just laid off, you're just laid off. But you can certainly be recalled to work. And as the economy, as we start to open things back up, we know that we're going to have this challenge, but that is the answer. And we get in, and the agencies I deal with, we're getting it through my OSHA and wage and hour most of the time. There are a couple of pieces to pay attention to with the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which was before the CARES Act on the paid sick leave and some of those other provisions. That applies to employers that are 500 or less. If you're under 50, there's a possible exemption if it could significantly impact the business as an ongoing concern. They don't have to send anything in or anything like that, but there are tax credits available there too. So I would encourage employers to consider that. And it's against current payroll taxes you've already paid, or if you're cash strapped, you can get an advance on those payroll taxes too to help cover at least an 80-hour period for most. So everybody knows that could become a challenge because it's such an economic difference between what sort of average pay is out there. In my former life, I was an electrician, so I would be better off going back to work, right? Because electricians get paid pretty well. But you can still require somebody to come back to work. Now, if you're a non-essential business right now, obviously you won't be able to do that.
Well, but if you're a non-essential business and you've applied for the payroll protection program, it's based on your payroll. And literally it says, call them back, even if you don't have customers, even if you don't have work, and even if they can't come in, you put them back on payroll and the federal government will pay them. That's the essence of the PPP. Right. So the other part of that is then they have to come back. You've taken out a loan based upon an obligation to keep people on payroll, and then if they won't come back, you actually are going to have a loan to pay back and it won't be forgiven. So this is the coordination of these two programs that I think we have a concern about, our members have a concern about. Any more questions, Brian, before we move along and say thank you to Sean?
Yeah, I thought, just for clarification's sake, and maybe I could make sure, I think I know the answer to this, but see if Sean agrees. We keep on saying, call somebody back as though a place is open. But what we really mean by that is add them back to your payroll. And if an employer calls their employee and they don't fit one of those special categories, COVID positive or caring for a person who's COVID positive or a child, if you call them back, in other words, you say, I want to put you back on my payroll and you're not going to have to do any work at all, and the person refuses, that would be a refusal to work, and therefore would make them ineligible for unemployment. Would that be true, Sean?
So I made a note of this question because I would like the answer to be that you're back on the payroll. I mean, if an employer is going to take that risk just to do that, I mean, it makes sense to me. But let me try to work on that, and we'll do it expeditiously, like we are doing everything. But I think that's a great question. I think it's an area we need to definitely figure out.
Yeah, so we'll report that back. Sean, he's been great about getting answers to us on this stuff. So, and then we'll probably put it on our site whenever we get it, and then we'll talk about it tomorrow.
Okay. Just in closing, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
With the MIOSHA, wage and hour, and others, absolutely internally, discussing how these things reopen, what pieces we need in place. If you are essential and continuing to operate, you do need to follow those CDC guidelines to be able to keep your workplace safe. And I have no doubt that some type of framework like that will be in play after we start to roll back out of this too, to make sure that, pay attention to the hand washing, the spacing if you can, PPE where necessary. We know we're going to have a big problem. We're talking about how we communicate this because in general, outside of hospitals, masks won't really, you might use the paper mask, you might use your homemade mask or something like that in certain places. It's not going to be an N95 for the vast majority. So we're, trying to create language around that because we know employees will be concerned that they need an N95. But all of those discussions are taking place, and everybody is just as anxious as all of you to, get beyond this in a healthy and safe way so that we're not right back into this because we were a little too quick or aggressive in what we were trying to do. So I appreciate all the work you guys do, and I appreciate all of the small employers that, everybody has their heart in that world, and we appreciate the work that you're doing, and I really appreciate the time and hope that I was helpful, and feedback's always appreciated.
No, very much so, Sean. It's good to have straight talk, and we appreciate it. In fact, we may very much like to have you get back on to talk about what it looks like to follow the CDC guidelines in a small business workplace.
Yeah.
Lots of talk about what it might look like in a big company, but how do we adapt that?
MIOSHA is developing webinars now that will be ready. So when we start fixing this.
Right. Good. It's a topic that a lot of people are asking questions about. So thank you again. Really appreciate you coming on and joining. Actually, earlier today, we released a survey to our members, and Brian, you helped construct that a little bit. Beyond just encouraging our members to participate in the survey, what's your message?
Yeah, what we want to be able to do is there's certain information that we would like to be armed with as we go into discussions with, and there's a little bit of opinion aspect of it, but really we're mostly interested in experience. What has happened in your business? We also want to get a sense for what your confidence is in terms of the survival of your business, given what you know right now. There's a lot of anecdotes out there, but if we had a big response to a survey, I think using it in terms of our communication with policymakers, it would be very helpful. And I also wanted to let you know that there's no connection or aspect of you personally. We're not going to publish who answered what on surveys. It's not that. It's aggregate information about business owners, what their experience is, some of their opinions on some of the things we see coming down the pike here in terms of practices that will be likely required, at least in some businesses. And but then I'm actually pretty anxious to know on a wider scale how you're feeling about the survival of your business. And I think that's an important message that policymakers need to hear.
So the survey went out at 2:30 this afternoon from SBAM. If you're listening to this, if you would make it a point to try to grab that, take the survey. We're also going to attach the link to this daily briefing. So if you're listening to this later on this evening, if you take a minute to fill out that survey, really is going to help inform our discussions. And you can tell, and we've been saying that advocacy during this whole thing is a really important part of what we're doing, and arming Brian with the information about how our members are surviving and navigating this whole thing is really going to be helpful. So thank you. Yesterday, a new executive order came out, really does affect our members. What is that?
Well, you might recall that one of the earliest executive orders was extending the date that you had to file your withholding returns, sales and use tax, and withholding taxes. So it got pushed. March got pushed out to April, and so now April's here. And so that would normally be the 20th of April that you would have to pay sales and use and withholding taxes. So all the March and all the April would be due then. The governor has pushed that out, or Treasury has pushed that out to for one more month. So everything that would have been due on the 20th is now due on I think it is May 20th also, Rob.
It is May 20th.
Correct? And that's for both March and April. So March, April, May. Here's the one thing. Of course, we asked for this, and we're thankful that they granted it. I do want to just make sure that everybody understands. So this is a delay in what you have to pay. It's not being forgiven. And I'm a little bit worried, and she's a little bit worried that people are going to get to a point when the taxes are due, and it's like I don't have the money that I withheld anymore, and that's a big problem. Okay, I mean when you collect sales and use tax, or you withhold taxes out of the payroll of your employees, and don't submit it when it's due, so it'll be due in May 20th. That's a big problem. So I just want you to start planning ahead. I could see for some people this being a problem, like that date kind of sneaks up on you and you're not ready, or you're not able to pay them.
Yeah, great advice. Lots of businesses over the years get in trouble for exactly that issue, just cash flow. You withhold it, you spend it on something else, and it's not there when it's due. And that is, as you say, a big problem. So we have been hearing just in the last 24 hours, our governor is in talks with other governors in our region. And really, I think to talk about coordinating restart efforts. What should our members know about that?
Any of you who follow me on Twitter know that I've been talking about this regional, the importance of a regional approach and similar standards compared to our neighbors. That this is something that for both disease management and economic competitiveness is very, very important. And so that on the East Coast, there were a handful of states that, including New York and New Jersey, that as they are contemplating reopening, they've decided to make decisions together. And that makes a lot of sense that on the East Coast and those states, their economies are so intertwined. Here in the Midwest, we have some simple, it might not be quite as integrated as say New York and New Jersey, but very, very integrated, especially in the border communities. The governor has reached out to the governor of Illinois, and they've had some discussions on this, and then the discussions, the inference is that it's a Midwest-wide discussion. Eventually, it will get to that point anyway, and we like that for some really practical reasons. First of all, if our rules are vastly different than those just over the border, our members are small business owners in those border counties, really not just the border county, but these days in the way business operates, it would get much deeper into Michigan in terms of its impact of having different standards. And then also, well, we kind of like the way that the governors to the south have approached this, in terms of the updated CISA standards that we talked a little bit about yesterday, and some of the rules that they have on outdoor professions and low risk professions. The idea of coordinating with them, maybe adopting a few of their standards, we take some comfort in the idea of the discussion moving this direction.
Yeah, we've been talking about this, that it is a competitiveness issue from state to state, and having a way more restrictive executive order or shelter-in-place order than other states matters to our members. When we come out and how we come out of this will be a competitive issue from state to state, and what we certainly don't want to do is to be at a competitive disadvantage as we get started again. So I agree. I think it's an important effort that our governor is making to reach out to the other governors. I hope that state, Midwest compact thing kind of comes together. So we'll keep an eye on that and continue to report about it. One final thing, Brian, the Wall Street Journal earlier today reported that they believe the PPP will run out of money on Friday. What does it mean to run out of money? at this point. If you have an application in and you simply haven't heard back, what do we think it means to have run out of money, the $350 billion?
So when they say run out of money, what they're saying is that the SBA is approved and has received a congressional appropriation to issue a certain number of guarantees. And so what that would mean is that they have issued to banks guarantees that are up to $349 billion, the original allocation that was made to them. So if you have an application in process, it matters where it's at in that process. If the bank has submitted that to the SBA has looked at it and approved it and sent back a guarantee, an approval of the guarantee to the bank, then it doesn't matter if you haven't closed yet. That if let's say your closing's not till next week, but you're approved this week, well then you're okay. Don't worry about hearing that they've run out of money. If you have not been approved, though, that's where I'm concerned, is that for those that are in a pipeline right now, they haven't been submitted to the SBA by their bank, or maybe they just hasn't been processed. Those, it's not locked down until the SBA says that that they've got this earmarked for you, and this certain amount of money earmarked for you, or a guarantee, I should say, because it's the bank's money, but it's a guarantee from the SBA. That's when you know you're good. So you look for the words "you are approved."
Yeah.
Like if you haven't received those words yet, then we got your application in process. Not everything looks good. We'll let you know. That is not the same as you have been approved. So those are the magic words you need to look for.
Okay, good advice. And I know a lot of people are somewhere in the middle of this process right now. Couple things as we wrap up today. Some new resources on our website. We're still committed to making it the best resource for small businesses in the state. So keeping it up to date on the tax executive order, some information about monthly and quarterly withholdings that you need to know, some of the website or webinars that we have done, like yesterday on the PPP tracking and spending. Your PPP is now on the website. You can go watch that if you didn't make it the first time. There's a new webinar coming this Friday on the tax implications of the EIDL or the PPP, as well as some other tax changes that were in the CARES Act. So you may want to take a look at that. And let me just announce this now. Next Tuesday in our daily briefing, Governor Whitmer is going to join us. And so she'll be joining this 3 o'clock briefing, and hopefully we'll have some insights you can share about when and how, and even the challenge that she's faced in trying to get to a place of talking about the circumstances under which we reopen this economy. So we look forward to having her. Brian, thank you for arranging that and making it happen. We'll see you tomorrow at 3 o'clock. In the meantime, don't forget to wash your hands. And Brian is once again.
I was muted. I don't know. I was doing so well before. And don't touch your face. See you tomorrow.